Hey, what's up, guys? This was a long one, so buckle in. You're going to want to hear all of it. We talk about Monday, Tuesday free agency news, and we talk about wide receivers to buy or sell. And I'll give you a hint. We both talk about selling a top 6, 5 Dynasty wide receiver, depending on how you rank them. We'll just say top 10 to be safe. But you're going to want to listen to this one. So buckle in. All right, what's up, everybody? Today we're doing another episode of Dynasty SZN. I'm your host, Patrick Hart, and we've got Austin with us. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about some wide receivers to buy and sell and going over some free agency news. Signings and stuff have started happening. We're recording this Tuesday night, so anything that's happened between the start of the legal tampering period on Monday to now, we're going to touch on the ones that we kind of think are exciting for fantasy and what it may lead into, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some wide receivers. So Austin, you got any big free agency signings you want to talk about, either offensive or defensive side of the ball?
Where do you want to start? Do you want to start at the quarterbacks? We saw that we both made a stash, by the way, guys. We both made a stash on QB right before the season on guys we thought might snag a job upcoming. And it looks like one of us has already panned out.
Yep.
Mitchell Trubisky to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't know if he's going to be uncontested there. Will they draft someone else to fight with him for the job? Are they going to get another older vet? Or what way do you think they're going to go with this?
I think this is them setting up for a rookie quarterback. Because if you look at the way his contract is structured, you know, he could get very little money. He could get a lot of money depending on like those incentives and those mile markers in his deal. So I really think this is going to turn into like a bridge year. Like I heard somebody say, I think it was on the Fantasy Footballers, they called him True Bridge Ski. And it was like, yep, no, that makes sense. So I really think we've heard a lot of reports about Malik Willis and them really liking Malik Willis. I think their goal is to get a quarterback. Will they trade up to get one? They still could because they're at 20. And so at this point, you've got a guy who, if worst case scenario, he needs to be your starting quarterback for 2 years, he can be. Best case scenario, you move up in front of Washington or you move up to that 8 to 10 range. Like if the Jets wanted to trade back, that would be a good spot to go to, is 10, right in front of Washington at 11. Take the QB you want, especially if the Panthers end up getting Deshaun Watson, which it doesn't really sound like they're the front runners right now, but who knows? Anything.
I think the Saints are currently the front runners.
Yeah, the Saints are reportedly the front runners, but
that changes by the day.
The
so
Panthers have been in it the whole time, so I expect them to put up a fight.
Falcons now too, so that entire. I guess he really wants to fight Tom Brady, is what it sounds like.
That's what it sounds like.
Trying to get on any team in that division.
Yeah, but I think that Trubisky is a very safe option for the Steelers, even if he isn't their next franchise quarterback. It gives them time to find one. So I think he's serviceable. I was more in the boat of I thought he would get a starting job coming into the offseason. Like you said, I stashed in the very last week of waivers running before the offseason. We had that little break where we open up right after the Super Bowl, but everything was locked between the fantasy championship and the Super Bowl. And Super Bowl came around and people start adding players to their roster for the offseason. Well, Austin had already tucked away Marcus Mariota on his bench, and I had Mitchell Trubisky, I had Dewey Haskins, and I have Sam Ehlinger still there. You know, just some random guys, which I was on the Carson is getting kicked out of Indy train forever. Let's just make it known, because I've had Sam Ehlinger on my roster the entire time. Not that I think Sam Ehlinger is going to be their next quarterback, but he's there. He's a guy. He's the only other guy. So who knows?
Yeah, my whole thing was, who the heck are they going to replace him with? And
they obviously don't care.
But
so
you were right. They didn't want him, and they moved on.
They obviously don't care who's replacing him at this point, so they just don't want to pay him.
When you stash a QB like this, and he ends up getting a job, are you trying to move on from him immediately? What are you doing with him? What's the plan?
I'm not trying to move on from Trubisky right now. I have been trying to move on from Baker all offseason. not trying. I think Baker is going to be a starter this year. I'm not worried about Baker starting. Even if the Browns, and let's talk a little bit about Baker Mayfield as we do this. Baker posted his long, heartfelt thank you to Cleveland today on social media. He posted it on Twitter, and just basically thanks Cleveland for, believing in him. He's giving it all to the city, and this is all in response to today, the ownership going and meeting with Deshaun Watson. So I don't know how serious Cleveland is about it, but the fact that Baker's putting out a goodbye message, it seems like, makes me a little more worried. But I've been trying to move on from Baker as an upgrade. But the problem is Baker's value is so low right now, it's been impossible. Now, I'm going to hang on to him, and I'm going to hang on to Trubisky till we get into the regular season. Because once we get into the regular season and they're starting games, their value is going to go up. I'm going to be able to get more for Baker Mayfield or Mitchell Trubisky when someone loses a quarterback or when somebody is suspended. Deshaun Watson gets suspended for 6 weeks and they need a quarterback. Well, here, have a quarterback for 6 weeks. Let's not forget that is a very real possibility. There's been multiple players with big investigations like this who didn't get any legal charges filed that the NFL still suspended. Zeke is the prime example, got 6 games. Tom Brady got 4 games for deflated footballs that he didn't even deflate. So if you think Deshaun Watson is safe, make sure you realize he could still be suspended. So I don't really think I'm flipping these guys yet. I think I'm waiting until the start of the season and then trying to flip them. But
here's an interesting thought about Baker that I was thinking of a possibility, because they talked about Deshaun Watson. If Deshaun Watson goes there, they still have Baker. They aren't going to put him behind Deshaun Watson for the year. They're going to move him. So what happens when the Browns take Deshaun Watson and then they ship Baker goes to over Seattle, the Indianapolis Colts
or Seattle,
either one.
Yeah. So that is, and Rap Sheet was on Pat McAfee today talking about Baker and said, if they do a deal for Deshaun, it doesn't sound like Baker is going to be a part of the deal. It sounds like they're moving forward with Davis Mills. So Baker would then be available to go to, like you said, Indy, or Seattle is the first one that comes to my mind. And we're going to talk a little bit about Seattle later, because I'll give you a hint. We both, I think you're talking about a Seattle wide receiver. I'm talking about a Seattle wide receiver. So we'll see. But I think there's still a possibility for them to go get a Jimmy Garoppolo or end up with a Baker Mayfield this year, and we'll see what happens. But the one I wanted to talk about first on free agents, it's not necessarily an offensive one, but it's Marcus May to the Saints. Because Marcus May, you have him on your team, right? He got hurt and missed a whole year.
And he tore an Achilles, that nasty Achilles tear that everyone's scared. Can they ever play again after it?
And he came back and balled out.
We franchise tagged him. He tore his Achilles. That sucked. But now he's coming straight back over to the Saints on a 3-year deal. He's 29 now, and that was part of the problem. Was he got very old very quick because he came out of the draft old. Yeah. So I think the Jets didn't want to go that young on a longer term deal. That's why they tagged him for a year, and I think they were looking for another 1 or 2. But clearly they might not have been offering him too much money, because that's less than 10 mil a year he's getting, like 9.5 or something like that.
Not a ton. So, but he's a good IDP asset. He's one of those guys that they lost Marcus Williams. He's going to slide right into that role. He was already a starter, but if you had him on your team and he was a free agent, some of these safeties are just going to disappear. So
and the question is with him is what I'm curious to watch is I have Marcus May in our league, and I had Marcus Williams. I think he's a free agent now.
Oh, he signed with Baltimore today.
Well, I mean a free agent in our Dynasty league.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So my question is, I had him and then dropped him, and the whole reason he was a free agent is he was playing every snap, but he just wasn't putting up the massive numbers. Marcus May was putting up the numbers. Now, is that a product of the player or their situation? Is Marcus May going to start declining in production compared to where he was at the Jets?
So I think it has.
Marcus Williams get better?
I think it has to do with their jobs. Now, the thing you have to remember about the Saints is they had old CD Deuce playing that nickel role, and he was that guy who was in the box. He was that extra run defender. He was that third linebacker, but they were in nickel. And so it was really interesting to see the way they played it. So you bring up a good point. Marcus May could have difficulty there, but I think Marcus May's play style is different than Marcus Williams. Marcus Williams doesn't, he's not as much he's more of an over the top defender, where Marcus May is more of a down to the box defender. You know what I mean? So I think that the play style itself, we got to see what role they put him in. If he is not in a focal position on that defense, he may be one of those guys that turns into a starting safety that you don't want on your team, which is crazy. But there are those out there. But there's one other safety that I wanted to talk about, and that is Xavier Woods to the Panthers. Former Cowboys safety, went to the Vikings on a one-year deal last year. Balled out. He was a top 10 IDP option at DB last year. 3-year, 15, just under 16 million contract. So I think they love Jeremy Chin, obviously, but he's going to be the other guy. And this is one of those, like you said, what he does on that defense could play a factor in his IDP relevancy, because last year he was great, but if he is losing all those stops to Jeremy Chin and Shaq Thompson and their beefed up defensive line and stuff like that, he may not get the tackle numbers we need for a safety to be viable. But I think he's a good player. I think they got him for a good price, and we're still waiting to see where some of these expensive guys like Honey Badger land. So there's a lot of big defensive moves happening, like DeMarcus Lawrence staying in Dallas. He was a question mark. He could have been gone. Now Randy Gregory is, surprise, I'm out of here. So
I saw the news that he signed with the Cowboys, and then I saw the exact same numbers, everything signed with the Broncos. I'm like, what the heck happened here?
Yep.
Apparently he had some issues with some language that was being slipped into his contract.
Well, so, it's in every Cowboys contract besides Dak.
But apparently it's not in
any other teams. Yeah.
Yeah. And he felt blindsided. Apparently Jerry Jones was pretty upset that it fell through, and it seemed like he might have been mad at his staff for the way they handled it more so than Randy Gregory backing out. And
it was, like you said, blindsided, because apparently one of the reports said he saw the contract terms and said F them or something, like, fuck these guys, I don't want to talk to these guys. And it's like, well, it's standard in most of their contracts. If he wasn't expecting it, that's one thing. But Randy Gregory has also had problems off the field with other things, to where, like, he's the reason that's in everyone else's contracts. So, like, I get it.
I actually did see a chart too that showed it was the number of players arrested and what they were arrested for, and I'm pretty sure the Cowboys were leading in arrests for the entire NFL.
Yes, there's a reason that they have this clause. I mean, I get it. You don't want to sign it if you don't want to, if it's something that possibly risks your money. Like, I get it. But if you got the same deal somewhere else, see ya. The same report was like, all right, the Cowboys are going after Von Miller now if they can afford him. Like, all right, cool. I'm all right with this. Like, I'm not hurt by Randy Gregory walking. I would have liked to see him stay because he had a great year, but he's had good times and then times where he can't be on the field. So I understand the contract language. A little weird, but it is what it is. I saw something right as I was hitting record. There was a linebacker who went to Nicholas Morrow signing with the Bears. He was...
Oh, I heard a report that the Cowboys were looking at it. Was the last thing I heard about him.
Yeah, so he signed with the Bears. I haven't really looked at the Bears depth chart to know where he's going to fit in. I haven't seen his contract numbers, just something I saw. I mean, he played a lot of roles, but in 2020, he was balling out. He looked like he was going to be a guy, and then he missed most of last year hurt. So It's something to watch. If he gets the starting spot, we'll have to see if he's rotating. Like I said, haven't looked
he's
at their
definitely
depth
the
chart.
number 2 next to Roquan. I don't see him taking Roquan off the field for a snap, but can he secure
two
all the
every
rest of
down
the snaps next to
linebackers?
him? Yeah.
So if he can be out there next to him, it'll be good.
We actually got a lot of interesting linebacker news in the past 2 days. I saw Jordan Hicks. He went over to the Vikings. We'll see how that works out.
So is he going to be replacing Anthony Barr?
I don't know. It's a 2-year, $10 million, so it's $5 million a year, so not insanely high.
Yeah.
But you definitely could see him taking over that Barr spot.
Yeah, because Anthony Barr was hurt most of last year, and then ended up having Nick Vigil was playing there instead of him. And Nick Vigil did the same thing the year prior to that when he played in Drew Tranquil's spot at the Chargers. He just is a depth linebacker who ended up starting a lot of games the last 2 years because of injuries. So I think there was a role for him there because Anthony Barr's free agent, so they didn't want to bring him back. So he should be that every down guy next to what's his name, Eric Kendricks.
Yeah, Kendricks I know was one of the top until I think did he miss a couple games at the very end? Because I know he was leading the league as the linebacker, and we had a big trade involving him in our Dynasty league. Yeah. And then he ended up just falling off at the end, unfortunately. But I don't know how strong, because I remember Barr, I think you had Barr at a point where he would put up a 0, then put up a solid game. So it was very iffy. And if
very hit and miss.
If Hicks is moving in that same spot, that could be a little bit worrisome.
I think he'll be okay. I really think that was more of Anthony Barr because he was playing hurt than anything else.
Yeah, and it could easily have been
I really think it was more Anthony Barr because if you look at that role next to Kendricks before that, him and Anthony Barr used to both be a viable option. He wasn't the one, like he was clearly the 2, but he was still worthy of almost an every week start, especially as a floor play. It was really just this last year where that position just kind of fell apart, and I think it was more like if you look at Nick Vigil, who played in his spot, put up better points than Anthony Barr did when he was on the field. So I think it was Anthony Barr and his health more than anything. So I think he should be fine. But Josie Jewell also re-signed with the Broncos, and we've talked about the Broncos needing linebackers.
They were grabbing them left and right. They were dying left and right. One would drop,
right
they
now,
grab a new one.
Right now, it projects to be him and Baron Browning as their 2 linebackers. They lost Josie Jewell. I'm pretty sure it was a torn pec last year, and he was out most of the season. And then Baron Browning ended up getting into that job once he was finally healthy and playing every down. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with some, like they have Stranad or however you say his name there as well, who he's really a depth guy, like he should be a depth guy, but he's also young and under contract. But they had nobody else. They had nobody else on that team besides Baron Browning and him before this. So bringing Josie Jewell back, that's pretty big. Should be a good addition to your IDP teams. I had somebody drop him last year in my other league, my other big Dynasty IDP league. They dropped.
Just not have the IR spots, or they didn't care to bother moving him over?
They didn't have the IR spots, and he was going to be a free agent, and so they just let him go. I was like, I had an IR spot, grabbed him, stashed him. I was like, all right, I'll hang on to Josie Jewell. I think he's going to come back and be a starter. Like he's had some injury problems, but he's a good linebacker.
Some other linebacker news here. It looks like Landon Roberts, the small guy, went back to Miami for a year, 3 1/4. He wasn't doing insane, but he's one injury away from being an every week starter in Dynasty. So he's a guy worth stashing if you want to try and hope for the upside. He's fairly young. He could definitely improve on last year. He was up and down, but had some good weeks. And then Devondre Campbell, we talked about him, I believe, on our last show. He re-signed 5 years, $50 million. And I think he's 28 too, so they re-signed him through 33.
Yep.
But yeah, that's a great deal. I think that was a bit team friendly. He wanted to stay there, and he balled out last year. I think he's just going to keep doing it. If you have him, keep him. If you don't have him, try and get him.
We mentioned Chris Barnes when we talked about that.
Oh, yeah, I picked him up randomly just on the off chance that he might be the last guy left, but now it goes back
he's
down
not going to get
Roberts role.
Not going to get the role of Devondre Campbell last year. So Devondre Campbell's back, and he's going to be the every down guy. He's the captain of that defense. So
yeah, that might just push me to drop Chris Barnes again.
Yep, same.
The last
Yeah,
Biggest signing at
there you go.
linebacker, Foyeside Oluokun.
Yep.
That guy, 3 years, 45 million. That's 15 million. Absolutely insane. And he went to the Jaguars, which, if you just saw what happened after that, they cut Miles Jack.
Yep.
Miles Jack is gone. So who knows where he's gonna go? He was solid last year. He was solid the year before. So I don't know if that was
And
a cap issue. It seems like a lot to pay Oluokun and then drop Jack. I don't know what his contract was looking like.
I think Miles Jack was on the last year with less guaranteed money because we had a guy in our league trade for a linebacker there. I can't remember who it was, but I remember talking to him and saying, well, you've got like their linebacker spot locked up because he had both of them. And it was last year, he had Damian Wilson, Miles Jack, and, Schobert left that team. So it was, it turned into those guys. But now with Miles Jack leaving, and wasn't Oluokun like the number one linebacker last year?
I think he might have been number one overall in
Yep, he was
defense.
Second, Jordan Brooks.
Yeah, he was an absolute monster, and I think he'll be able to keep doing exactly what he was doing over there in Jacksonville.
I do too, and the big thing that you're going to look at now is who's going to be the every down player next to him. So they still have Miles Jack is gone. I believe Damian Wilson may be gone as well. I'll have to check his deal. I think he was on a 1-year deal. So we got to see who's going to be next to him. I think that's the last big linebacker. What about some offensive players?
That's it for the line. Let's take a look here. What position you want to go over? So we had some running back news and we had some wide receiver news.
Yeah, let's talk about running backs first.
So the first two guys that got signed were both of the free agents coming out of Arizona. Did you notice that? How it was both guys, one after the other, back to back?
Yep.
Only one went back, though.
Yeah, and that's
James
big.
Conner.
Like if he's a 3-down workhorse and he's got multiple years under contract, that's a big deal for a dynasty.
Yeah, because you saw how well he did as soon as Chase Edmonds went down and he got the every snap role.
He was actually more efficient as a pass catcher than a runner. So he scored so many rushing touchdowns, though.
Yeah, and I was worried because I had him in one of my redraft leagues. I was worried. I felt like, this got to drop off, right? This is just an early season thing. And then the next week, 2 more touchdowns. The next week, another touchdown. The next week, multiple touchdowns. He just didn't stop scoring them. I
do think, though, we still have to kind of reset our expectations with James Conner because I'm not expecting last year every season. I think that Kyler was very hurt, and Kyler's mobility is also going to impact their play in the red zone once they have DeAndre Hopkins actually on the field and available. Like, there is going to be more people taking away those touchdowns. We still have to look at how many touchdowns he scored, but he's still going to be efficient. You're still going to be able to plug him into your lineup every week. Now, what if they add somebody in the draft? What does that do? Do you think if they add a 3rd down back, how far do you drop James Conner? Say they add a 3rd round running back.
Yeah, if he's dropping in the 3rd round, that is going to drop Conner. Anything, I think 4th, you get worried. After the 4th, you feel pretty okay.
Yeah.
3rd, you're definitely not feeling okay.
Yeah.
I think 3rd would make him... I don't know how much, because you'd have to look at when Chase Edmonds was there, how much would the new guy be eating into that? But then again, teams, when they get a young new guy, they like to ride him. They like to use the young, fresh wheels. They like to take their older guys, give them a little bit of breaks.
But they just paid Conner.
Yeah, so the question is, would they even bother drafting a running back that high? I definitely think you're worried if they do, but I'd hope that because they just paid a guy, that they'd use that draft capital on a different position.
I agree,
but if they do, you're definitely not feeling good about it.
They had Chase Edmonds, which the biggest thing about Chase Edmonds has always been, is he going to get 3-down work, which he hasn't really gotten to that role, and I don't even think the Dolphins are going to give it to him. But they could. Who knows?
Yeah, the Dolphins are the team I see might be more likely to be drafting that third-round running back and then using Chase Edmonds as their pass-catching third-down running back.
If they drafted Kenneth Walker,
young guy,
Kenneth Walker, a guy who hasn't caught any passes in college, right? And you throw him in there, and then Chase Edmonds is your third down back. Okay, like I could see that happening. I think that's more in the realm of possibilities than James Conner having to fight off some carries, but it is still a possibility.
Because right now, like I said, you're feeling good about having Chase Edmonds on the Dolphins now. If you had him, you felt like you won free agency a little bit because he went to one of those big opening teams.
Yep.
But yeah, the draft could ruin all of those plans.
Yeah, and then this one, just not a big deal, but James White re-signed with the Patriots, 2 years, $5 million. He's still going to be their third down guy. He had a torn ACL early in the year.
Goes back to doing nothing.
Brandon Bolden is a free agent. He is gone.
Or is he? Okay, then he's not even coming back to the team because that's going to be their passing guy.
So James White, he's going to be back, but he's going to play that same role we expect James White to play. Like that's just what he does.
$2.5 million. He's not a feature of the offense. He's not going to soak up too much.
What that does worry me a little bit about is the Ramondre Stevenson, because Damian Harris is going to be their first and second down runner. Are they going to? Is it going to be like a Devin Singletary, Zach Moss sort of thing, where these guys are doing the exact same thing and rotating drives? Are they going to be? Is it going to be Damian Harris 80% of the time, Ramondre Stevenson when he needs a breather, and then James White on third down? Like that's what worries me about James White coming back, because I wanted Ramondre Stevenson to have the opportunity to be that third down player, because he can catch passes and he's a big dude and he still can get outside with those swing passes and stuff. But they love James White and he's been doing it for years, so they brought him back for cheap. Makes sense. I don't know why they wouldn't if they could. So, but it does hurt Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. It could kill Ramondre Stevenson. We don't know. We're just gonna have to see how they use him. But just something to keep an eye on. If you can trade Ramondre Stevenson, even though I just said buy him 2 days ago, if you can trade him on the hype, you can. Just know if you hold him and you're buying him cheap, you're in it for the long haul, because you're waiting for Damian Harris to be a free agent at the end of the year. So you're taking this season, no matter what happens, you're buying Ramondre for next year. Just know that. So I still think he's a buy, but if you need somebody right now, he may not be the right buy for you. So just keep that in mind. But we're going to talk about those contracts expiring as we look at these guys to buy and sell. Before we get into our wide receivers to buy and sell, the last group we'll talk about a little bit of free agents. Let's talk about wide receivers. So we got some franchise tag guys we already talked about, but after that, I cry because Cedric Wilson is no longer a Cowboy.
Yeah, so that was the first one I was going to mention. You were hoping the plan was moving on from Cooper, but you got Michael Gallup re-signed. You got CeeDee Lamb. You just get your third in Cedric Wilson, and your core is set. But it looks like he got sniped.
But we do have Dalton Schultz, so that's still 3 very good receiving options. We know how much Dak loves Dalton Schultz. So
how big is Cedric Wilson on the Dolphins now then?
I think
not too high. It's $22.8 million. That's less than I think Zay Jones and who was the other minor guy who got a $30 million deal. It was Zay Jones and can't remember his name right now, but someone else got a $30 million 3-year sort of deal situation. Oh, Russell Gage. That was the other guy.
Yes, Russell Gage.
So Cedric Wilson's less than both of those guys. But he's going to the Dolphins, which I feel like he has more opportunity there than Russell Gage is going to behind some big mouths over in Tampa. So
the only thing I think this means is that they are committing to Jalen Waddle, right? So I think this means Jalen Waddle is going to be the focal point in that receiving game. They didn't go out and sign some big name. They still have Devontae Parker, so I think Cedric Wilson is the perfect number 3. And what it also does is it gives Jalen Waddle and his speed an ability to work outside. Whereas he was working a lot from the slot and they didn't have after Jakeem Grant left and they had some injuries, and we were kind of looking at Will Fuller on one side before he then got hurt and never came back, and Devontae Parker on the other side before he got hurt and then eventually came back. It was supposed to be Jalen Waddle in the slot, but Cedric Wilson gives him the ability to be outside. And that is big for Jalen Waddle's production because they're still going to scheme him getting the ball around the line of scrimmage. But it adds another layer to his game where he can be a deep threat. He can be that guy who burns somebody with his speed, and he's a good route runner, and he's just an all-around stud wide receiver. So it gives him an extra level. I think it gives him that big playability. It gives him more than just the PPR Hunter Renfrow game we were getting.
Yeah, it definitely is going to help him out. Now, another smaller amount that I want to talk about real quick because it's the Jets. Braxton Berrios is back.
Yep.
If anyone's excited for that, I don't think you really should be. He only was super spicy at the end of the season with his heroics because there were so many injuries. That one's not going to be that big.
All it really does is put just the dagger in any of my Denzel Mims dreams because Denzel Mims ain't playing in the slot, and they clearly like Elijah Moore all over the field.
Yeah, that's one of the guys like Waddle who this signing could mean, he's their number 3 in the slot, push out more to the outside.
Exactly. So
because the dude's got speed, he can go deep.
I had Mims on my taxi squad the whole time, and he was finally no longer taxi eligible this offseason, so I moved him to my bench. And as soon as this news came out, I dropped him. He was going to be fighting for the number 3 role. And if Corey Davis tore his ACL, I might go try and pick up Denzel Mims. But otherwise, I'm not touching him anymore. So I moved on from there. I dropped a couple other people. I've got another guy I'm dropping tonight because of some free agency moves. But another one we'll talk about before we talk about the Jaguars. Let's talk about a guy who was a former Jaguar in DJ Chark. So he went up to the Lions, which gives them an outside receiver. They still have Amon-Ra, and they re-signed Josh Reynolds. So it looks like we've got their receiver group. And I don't think it's great, but I think it's better than they have had. Granted,
and I'm honestly not sure if they're done. I think they might add one more outside guy. Another, either a draft pick, I think is more likely, but they could go for another one more big name signing coming out here. Someone more than, because it's just
Allen Robinson or something to kind of bridge that gap, a veteran to help grow that team. Who knows? I don't know if Allen Robinson wants to go to a project like that.
Yeah, it's probably the last place he wants to go, to be honest.
Yes. But, I don't know what his market's like. I don't know how much money he wants. There's a few other guys still out there, like Will Fuller, Jamison Crowder, Juju, Allen Robinson.
One I could see. Crowder and Juju are more of the role that Amon-Ra is currently occupying, so I don't see them going there. But yeah, I could definitely see those other two. Could definitely be a possibility signing there. Or, like I said, more likely they're probably going to just put it in the draft for their last guy. That's what I
would guess as well. Give them a guy who can play on special teams and stuff as well. So, couple other ones here. Let's see. The Packers put a tender on Allen Lazard, which I think Allen Lazard could have a bigger role in that offense if MVS leaves, which he is also a free agent.
Yeah, it sounds like some people are actually seeking out MVS. Yeah. They like his speed. I think the Raiders are one of the teams pairing his deep ball ability with Derek Carr's big arm.
Makes sense. They love speed. So I think
speaking of Packers and their wide receivers, this isn't quite a signing, more of a update from our last news, because we talked about Devontae Adams getting that franchise tag, but
more like a lack of signing. Yeah, it's more about a lack of signing on this one, because he said, I will not play on the franchise tag. So
it looks like they are far apart right now. It looks like they aren't very close.
The news I've heard about it is
they have different ideas of what the highest paid really is.
Exactly. There was that extension with D-Hop that made it they're trying to argue $27 million a year, but then others are using Julio Jones for like his full contract. So there's a disagreement about what the most pay is. But we did find out Aaron Rodgers' contract, and it was not 4 years, $200 million, but it was still a lot of damn money. So it is more team friendly than a $50 million cap hit, which is what a $200 million 4-year contract would be. But it is still $50 million a year, like over the first 3 years, like on average. But I think his total pay is like $42 million or something in year one, and then it's $56 million in year two. But the way it all works out, there's a couple extra years on the end of it that help shuffle out some signing bonus, and I don't know how much total that signing bonus was, but overall he saved, I think it was like $18 million against the cap for this year by doing that, even though he's getting paid a ginormous amount, which is just the standard these days. He is the most or the highest paid player with this contract. Obviously, Aaron came out and said, this was, not about being the highest paid player. That wasn't his goal, but, maybe that is just a byproduct of back-to-back MVPs, and everybody wants to hate Aaron Rodgers. If you have back-to-back MVPs and your team is trying to keep you and they want to make you the highest paid player and you still get a cap-friendly deal, why would he ever say no? They just begged him to stay and not leave them with Jordan Love. So I don't know what everybody's upset about. So anything you wanted to say about Aaron Rodgers' contract?
Yeah, do you think he told them with every penny that they're saving, you give every single cent to Devondre? He better be out there with me week one.
I would. We talked so much during the offseason about Aaron Rodgers is going to make his decision before the franchise tag deadline so that Devondre can be franchise tagged. We knew this was coming. We knew they were going to have to pay him. We knew they were going to have to give him money. But the thing that you can do with Devondre now is that with that Aaron Rodgers contract, he's there 3 years. This wasn't a, we'll figure it out next year. This was a, Aaron Rodgers is the Green Bay Packers quarterback the next 3 years or he retires. So they are going to kick the can down the road as far as they possibly can to get everything they can out of that 3-year window. They have to. Otherwise, it's for nothing, right? So why make the guy the highest paid player if you're not going to do everything you can to let the back-to-back MVP win you a Super Bowl? So they've got to pay Devondre.
They drafted Jordan Love in the first place. What are you trying to do?
Yeah, that's true. That's
Higgins
true.
is right there, and you're trading up for Jordan Love. What's going
Dude,
on?
Every time you say that, it hurts me inside because I just think
I can never get over it.
I think of what T. Higgins could be doing on that team, and it's just absurd. But
I think we have one more, the biggest contract to talk about for wide receivers before we move on. Maybe not the biggest player, but the biggest contract for sure.
And like I said,
4 years,
Jacksonville.
$72 million. Incentives up to $84 million.
Christian Kirk.
That is insane. And it's Christian Kirk.
Yeah. And they had to pay the bad team tax, so we got to take that into account. Like, you're trying to get somebody to come to this dumpster fire, and they paid a lot of people a lot of money. And I don't think Christian Kirk is a bad player. I just don't think he is the player they're paying him to be. Now, if you look at the contract is actually very good. The way it is written, a lot of this money doesn't really exist because they have an out after like 2 years. And it is a very fair contract money-wise for those couple of years. So I don't expect this to be that 4-year deal. I expect this to be a 2-year deal. And the numbers don't matter. The money's fake. We're playing with Monopoly money. The salary cap is a myth. So I don't really care. I don't think Christian Kirk is an alpha number one wide receiver, but they paid him to be their number one wide receiver. Now that, like, because Marvin Jones is getting a fraction of that, and they still have.
They want to move on from Chenault.
That's what I was going to say. They still have LaVisca, and they want to get rid of him. Which we're 2 head coaches in regime. Like, we're beyond LaVisca at this point. Like, we had the same thing coming into last year where there was rumors of them wanting to get rid of DJ Chark. Like, we got new coaches trying to build their team the way they want it. And Laviska doesn't sound like he fits in. Now, I'm not moving on from Laviska. I still have hope for Laviska. He's 23 years old, and if he goes to another team, I think he could do well. I want Laviska to go to the Cowboys and be the number 3. That's what I want to happen. But if he stays in Jacksonville, he's probably going to be worthless. So
hey, maybe the Lions can trade something cheap for him.
That's true, but I don't think they would because they're probably going to put him in the same role as Amon-Ra St. Brown. So, but I would be doing cartwheels if the Cowboys went and traded for Laviska as the number 3. So, he would be perfect slot guy. You can move CD outside. You know, CD is kind of the Elijah Moore talk, right? Like, at first, like, he's just a stud. He's obviously got really high draft capital, so it's a little, you know, it's not the exact same, but he was one of those guys who kind of was a great slot player, but he's great outside. Like, you can use him anywhere. And there was a period of time where Michael Gallup is a good perimeter receiver, and then you've got Amari on the outside, so CD was kind of working the slot. But now that Amari's gone, Gallup's still going to be outside probably. It opens, like we were talking about with Waddle, it opens up CD to move inside and outside. One of the things that I think is funny about that is when Amari Cooper scored a touchdown this last season, after the game he was being interviewed about it, and he was the first read on the play, and it was for a touchdown. They knew, like, if he was open, it was a touchdown. And CD asked him to switch spots, and he said no because he wanted to be scoring that touchdown. CD wanted to switch spots with him to score that touchdown. CD could be insane this year if they bring in, like, if Noah Brown right now, who is, or Simi Fehoko, or either of those guys, if either of those guys are the number 3, like, that opens up CD Lamb to do literally anything on the field. So I just think that losing Amari Cooper is not the end of the world. And there's a lot of people who disagree with me and think that it's all Zeke's fault. So
Zeke's the reason they can't sign
it is what it is.
Their tackle and Cooper and keep Cedric Wilson, and somehow his one contract equates to like 30 different guys he could have had.
Yeah, it's all Zeke's fault. I don't know if you've heard, but Zeke has this big running back contract that nobody else in the league has, and everybody hates him for it. So okay, but we talked free agency. We rambled enough about who's going where. Let's talk about our buy sells for our wide receivers. You want to start with buys or sells?
Let's start with sells this time. I think we started with buys last time.
We did. So I'll let you go first. Go ahead and hit me with your first one.
All right. So my first one, and this is going to shock people. I'm going to go with the stud who balled out last year. And I'm saying move on because I don't think he can do it again. Not with his current situation. I'm talking Deebo Samuel ended the season as the number 3 wide receiver.
/ running back.
He doesn't have Jimmy G anymore. He has a running quarterback. And if you want to see how well this is going to start out, just go look at how terrible the passing situation for Lamar was. Now, I think Trey Lance has the possibility to be a much better passer than Lamar is. I think he has a better ceiling. But he is so not there yet that who knows how long it's going to take for him to really get that cannon going. Who knows how many times he could be throwing it to Deebo, but instead he's keeping it himself and scrambling with it. I feel like there is going to be a massive drop-off in the passing game of the San Francisco 49ers this year compared to last year. And if you got people who are willing to buy in on Deebo's age, on the fact that he was the number 3 last year, you can get a haul for him right now. It might take him a couple of years before he can get back to.
Not to mention, he got so many points in the running game. He was a running back half the season.
Yeah, the second half they just converted him to running back.
So if he doesn't get those rushing points, which there is
Why would he rush it when Trey Lance can rush it?
Well, even if he's not splitting time, even if he's in the backfield, like, was it because Elijah Mitchell was banged up, or was it because they love Deebo? Like, I think it's a combination of both, but Deebo has had his own problems staying healthy. Are we going to manufacture all these touches to Deebo and him stay healthy, like I don't like to say a player's injury prone because injuries could happen to any player anytime. But when there's a history of injury after injury after injury, like even going back to college, you're like, all right, do I trust this player to be on the field for 17 games? I don't trust Deebo to be on the field for 17 games. He was playing through injuries this year. Granted, he played great, but he was getting running back carries. He was their offense. Brandon Ayuk, who is still on that team, was worthless. Like there was a couple games where you could have started Ayuk, but like you didn't know when to start him. And I think if you sell Deebo right now, you're selling him off of the dream of those running back points. So I think those points really pushed him over the top. And I don't know if he's going to get those. And like you said, I expect that passing game to take a big hit next year.
Yeah, I see no chance of Deebo being number 3 overall wide receiver.
I don't think he's in the top 12.
Yeah, he's gonna struggle to be a relevant wide receiver too, trying to have Trey Lance learn the ropes, trying to get it all situated there.
And I don't believe he has gotten a contract extension, but I don't believe that the Niners are going to let him go anywhere. So even if he hasn't signed one yet, which let's see right now. Now he would be a free agent at the end of the year, but like I said, I expect them to retain him. I don't see them letting Deebo Samuel walk out of the building unless they decide, hey, let's use Ayuk instead. And actually, we only use one wide receiver, so we don't need to keep Deebo. We'll just use Ayuk. So, I mean, who knows? I have no idea what they'll do, but he's a leader on that team, but so was Jimmy Garoppolo. So I have no clue. I stopped trying to decipher Kyle Shanahan after I drafted Trey Sermon. So I am totally out on Kyle Shanahan. I don't want to play those games. Like somebody else can deal with it. But I'm selling Deebo. So I agree with you. Anything else you want to say on Deebo?
No, I think that just about covered it. Who's your next guy?
So another guy who's top 5, wide receiver. I have Cooper Kupp. And
top 1 maybe.
Depending on who you talk to, he's probably not your top 1.
Last year, yeah.
But yeah, he's the wide receiver 1 last year. The reason I'm selling him is because he was the wide receiver 1 last year. Antonio Brown was able to, put up some crazy numbers in Pittsburgh, and Cooper Kupp probably does have the chance to repeat as a wide receiver 1. But I'm not betting on it. So if I can get wide receiver 1 value out of him, if I can take Cooper Kupp and I can turn him into DK Metcalf and picks, I will. If I can take Cooper Kupp and I can turn him into Chase Claypool and a buttload of picks, I will. If I could take Cooper Kupp and trade him for Terry McLaurin, I will. And I'm using these names for a reason, but we'll get to it. So the big thing with Cooper Kupp is he was obviously dominant. He was obviously great. He had breakfast and coffee with Matthew Stafford every day, and he was a baller. I also want to point out that this team had trouble with wide receiver. Okay? They lost Robert Woods to a random torn ACL in practice that was kind of like they didn't think it was torn, and then all of a sudden he's out the rest of the year. But Robert Woods will be back, and Robert Woods was good this year. He was good. OBJ was good. So if you want to hang on to Cooper Kupp for now, I'm not saying trade him for a bag of peanuts because he is going to be a wide receiver 1. I just don't think he's going to be the wide receiver 1. And I think there are more players who also have they're going to be a number 1 or a wide receiver 1, but they have the potential to be a wide receiver 1 for the next 5 seasons, like Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, guys like that, where obviously you're not going to be able to trade Cooper Kupp for these guys, but you might be able to throw something else in there with Cooper Kupp and go get one of these guys because of where his value's at. So you don't need to necessarily take a tier down. You could try to upgrade from Cooper Kupp because of how valuable he is right now. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think honestly, if you can find the guy who's looking, they think they're in position, they're a wide receiver away from winning it all. If you can sell them for everything they got, giving them Cooper Kupp, you can make out with a king's ransom. You could have multiple, like 3, 4 different relevant every week starters out of how high Cooper Kupp just ended last year.
Yeah.
So if you can flip the best year of his of most
Probably
wide
of his
receivers
career.
this decade's careers.
Yeah.
Like that was probably the best wide receiver year we're going to see for a while out of anybody. I don't think anyone's going to come close to the numbers Cooper Kupp put up this last year anytime soon.
And that's
so
why
if you can get someone who's
you
willing to
sell
buy into that, if you can sell it, get your king's ransom, get your entire team fleshed out and completely set to win championship after championship. You don't have to have the top guy if you have a bunch of top guys, and you can easily turn him into a bunch of good players.
And I'm a big proponent of like tiering down. So if you have one of these elite guys, like I said, a lot of people play for different strategies. I'm one of those guys. I want my players to have a solid floor. I appreciate upside, but I still want a solid floor with my players. And Cooper Kupp has a solid floor, but he also has an incredible ceiling. And so you're trading away a very good player if you sell Cooper Kupp. But you should be securing players that are going to be fundamental to your team for the next 3 or 5 years. And the goal with these trades is always, we talk about, selling Derrick Henry possibly, like because of his age and these incredible seasons he's had. And, I was saying it before last season. I was saying sell Derrick Henry, which if you look at it in the grand scheme of things with the games he missed, you could say, oh, yeah, that was a win. If I sold Derrick Henry, I won. But if you look at what he did on a per game basis, you wouldn't want to be getting rid of Derrick Henry. But you want to get rid of these players while they have value. And if you can trade them before they go into a season where that value falls off or where that value kind of plateaus because of age, production, or whatever that may be, the fact of the matter is if Cooper Kupp doesn't go out and repeat what he did last year, he's going to go from number 4 in people's dynasty rankings to 15 because of his age alone. So if you sell him now, you're getting ahead of that. And you can get the most you ever possibly could for him. Because as soon as he has one injury, one bad game, his value is going to fall off the charts because he's about to hit 30. Doesn't mean he's going to be a bad player. He's still going to have good fantasy seasons. He could have 3 more top 24 seasons, 5 more top 24 seasons. But he's not going to be the wide receiver 1, and you can get multiple wide receiver 1 upside players. So that's the way I view it. But again, you're only selling Cooper Kupp for a king's ransom. But I think he is a good candidate to do so. So
you don't sell him just to sell him. You sell him because he did so well. You can command the highest price of any wide receiver right now.
Yep. So give me your other sell. Who's your next guy?
So my next sell is another person who is also at that age 29, looking near the end, but the situation isn't looking so good. This player, past couple of years, I feel like every year people are hating on him, and he's super underrated. In redraft leagues, you can get him at an insane value, but that's over. I'm talking Tyler Lockett. He's 29. He lost his quarterback, and unless they end up getting someone like Deshaun Watson, he's not young enough to learn it with someone new, to get back to the same rapport he had with Russell Wilson, and to be the baller that he was. He's not going to find a situation as good as what he had, and he doesn't have the age of like a DK Metcalf on that team, who's much younger and has a future ahead of him. He's 29, and
he's got a contract too.
Him. They talked about trading him, and that was something like, okay, if they're going to trade Tyler Lockett, he could go somewhere, and he could actually maintain relevancy if he goes to a big place for maybe another year or two. But apparently they're not trading him anymore. They rescinded that. They say they want to keep him. Yep. It looks like they want him and DK to be around the next guy, but
I think a lot of that goes into them trying to get Deshaun.
Yeah, it could be, honestly, we don't want to blow up. Look, we're not blowing up our team. We're still having pieces. Please come here.
Yeah.
But if they're adamant about keeping him for whoever is coming around next, I don't see him being anywhere of what he was with Wilson.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have enough time left on his age for Dynasty, for sure. He doesn't have enough time left.
If they move forward with Drew Lock and keep Tyler Lockett, I will be surprised. But if they bring in a different quarterback who, like we talked about earlier, say Deshaun goes to Cleveland, Baker ends up in Seattle, Jimmy goes to Indy, right? That's a very plausible situation. That could happen. So if he's
Well, they
there,
could keep him for their young guy if they draft somebody.
exactly.
If they don't want Drew Lock and they get someone young.
And I think Tyler Lockett is good enough to go anywhere and be productive. But what you're saying is he's not going to have that connection that he had with Russell Wilson no matter where he goes, because he was Russ's guy. It didn't matter where Russ was scrambling out of the pocket. They could find each other. He was the deep threat. He's a great route runner. He's got speed. Like, he's just a good player. He's going to be productive wherever he goes. But those 60-point, touchdown weeks that were a possibility with Russell Wilson that happened a couple times, you don't have that upside anymore with Drew Lock or whoever is going to come into that building. And so I think it is a good sell option. And my next sell, unless you want to say anything else before I move on.
No, I think that covers it.
My next sell also lost his quarterback, and that's Michael Pittman Jr. Michael Pittman Jr. He's ranked 20th in Fantasy Pros, 29th on RotoWire. 29 is probably more realistic to where I'd have him, but I'd probably have him in the low 30s. I haven't finished my whole top 48 that I'm doing for wide receivers yet, but he's probably going to end up somewhere around there. I'm kind of waiting for free agency to fall before I finalize any rankings. So we'll kind of see what happens here over the next week. And if they bring in another wide receiver, he'll fall even more probably, especially if they bring in a good slot receiver, because Jimmy Garoppolo is who I think is going to end up as their quarterback. And we are hearing people want Jimmy Garoppolo there because he doesn't check out of runs and because he threw the ball 6 times in a championship game. Because Jonathan Taylor is there. You've got a possible MVP candidate at running back. Besides that, Jimmy Garoppolo really throws the majority of his passes over the middle. Whether that's the offense he was coming from or Jimmy Garoppolo's ability, I'm worried about him going to another place and starting every game. Obviously, Jimmy can win games. I don't think he's an incredible passer, though. And I think Carson Wentz was a better quarterback for what Michael Pittman does than Jimmy Garoppolo is. So we saw Michael Pittman kind of break out at the start of the year, and he looked phenomenal. And then it kind of petered out over the end of the year, just like Carson Wentz did. And I think what you would get with Jimmy Garoppolo is somewhere in the middle of that, especially when it comes to Michael Pittman and his skill set. You're not getting trash Carson Wentz, but you're not getting good Carson Wentz either. You're getting somewhere in between. And I think that he's got a higher floor and a lower ceiling as a passer. So are we expecting Michael Pittman to do more than he did last year? I'm not. But I think people are looking at Michael Pittman as one of those guys who could take another step. And ranking him as a wide receiver 2, it's a little ambitious for me. And if you've got somebody who values him as a wide receiver 2, which I would have ranked him as a wide receiver 2 a quarter way into the season last year, but I won't now. So if you've got somebody who's still hanging on to that you can either sell him to, or if you want to go try and acquire him and see what quarterback they get, and then once they get Jimmy, sell him, see if maybe somebody buys that bump a little bit. It's another thing you can do. But, I am not in on whoever is his quarterback. So I just don't think, like we talked about, who are they going to go to from Carson Wentz? I don't think there is an upgrade available.
But the only thing I said is Jimmy G, they could argue that it is an upgrade. I feel like it was a neutral move, and they would have to pay more than they'll get back from getting rid of Carson to make that move. But yeah, no, I don't think he's got the arm. Like, I was high on Michael Pittman. I used to think he was a really good player, that I wanted a young guy, a bright future, could be a dynasty like cornerstone, but
like sneaking up to almost a T. Higgins.
I'm scared. I am so scared of him now.
Like, Michael Pittman at the start of last season had the opportunity to be what T. Higgins is now. Yeah. And he did not get there. And that T. Higgins is doing it as the number 2 in an offense, where Pittman was the 1. He was the guy. So I just, I'm not in. I just don't believe it. We look at where he finished as the guy with Carson Wentz. I don't see him finishing higher than that as the guy with Jimmy Garoppolo. So I'm out. But what else? That was your last. You already did your 2 sells, right? So we're on to buys
so
now.
Now we're on to the buys.
So this is where we get to have some fun. All right, who are we sending offers for? Who's your first one?
So my first one is a guy who, with everything happening around him, you might think his value is dropping and he's going to be worse coming up. But I think the exact opposite. But because so many people are down, you might be able to get a great steal. I'm talking Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin is the guy with Carson Wentz there. You're like, oh God, they signed Carson Wentz. They were supposed to get one of the big names. They were supposed to maybe try and get Russ, or maybe do something exciting. But Carson's the best guy that Terry's had throwing to him in who knows how long. And the fact that people are going to look at that as a downside, they're going to drop Terry because of that, when in reality his performance should be going up. I think this is a great spot for you to grab a guy who has proven that he can produce even with crap throwing to him. Even if after this year he doesn't go back to them, or he doesn't go to a good team, because I know his contract's coming up. If he moves on and goes to another bad team, he's got production with bad teams, and he's got nothing but up at this point. How can you end up with a situation worse than Heineke throwing to you? I don't see how things get any worse for him. They only get better, but his value is lower than it's ever been. So I think Terry McLaurin might be your best steal grab right now.
And I think the problem with Terry McLaurin right now is that he's still priced too high for me. So he's in that.
Yeah, you have to have the owner who was tired about last year and then saw Wentz, was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Yes.
And then you take him. If people are still hyped, because I see, like you were saying, he is pretty high on some people's boards. They still recognize the talent. Last year, going into the redrafts, I thought he was way too high.
Yeah, I did too.
I did not like his position last year. But now I feel like he's going to drop from last year for sure. We'll see how much. We'll see how, as this goes along, as more Carson's a terrible person rumors come out.
Because right now, like in Dynasty rankings, Fantasy Pros has him right behind Deontay Johnson, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, Chris Godwin. RotoWire has him behind DeAndre Hopkins, CeeDee Lamb, DK Metcalf, T. Higgins. So a little bit higher. DJ Moore's below him in that one. But right above like that Mike Evans, Elijah Moore kind of line, which is the very beginning of wide receiver 2. And I just don't know if I'm paying that price for him. But like you said, he had a rough year last year. He's had a rough couple years. And he also has that free agency upside at the end of the tunnel. So if they don't bring him back, he has the opportunity to go somewhere awesome. And he also has the opportunity to go somewhere that has a bad quarterback or is rebuilding. But we've already seen him do well with bad quarterbacks. Now, well is subjective. It's not what we want from him, but he was a playable fantasy asset. And even though he finished kind of less than what we would hope for, and he only had like 4 real big weeks, I actually considered him for one of my sell players in this episode. The only reason I didn't is because, like you said, this is the best quarterback he's had throwing to him. So it is what it is. I use the same thing. When I looked at Noah Fant in that trade, and he went over there. Now, obviously, he's been killed now by them re-signing Will Dissly, but they also still have Gerald Everett. And
I think Gerald Everett might be a free agent as well.
He might be.
I'm not positive on that, but he might be, because I remember seeing someone talking about.
He is a free agent.
Or no, the Bengals talking about possibly signing him, but
he is a free agent. Don't do that, Bengals, because I'm trying to pick up Drew Sample, so don't do that. But I think that bad teams can still have great wide receivers, and the one thing that worries me about Terry McLaurin is how much Ron Rivera loves Curtis Samuel. And Curtis Samuel was hurt a lot last year, which Curtis Samuel is hurt a lot most years. However, when Curtis Samuel is on the field, he's electric. Okay, if any player reminds me of Deebo Samuel, it's Curtis Samuel, and it has nothing to do with their last name. It's purely their roles and how much their coach wants to give them the ball. And I think that he could be a big part of that offense if he's healthy this year. But again, he was hurt most of last year. He's been hurt a lot. But he came over.
And maybe they need someone who could take some of the coverage off of Terry.
Adam Humphries was a receiver in that offense. Okay, Adam Humphries was a receiver in that offense. We could see Diami Brown make some more work. DeAndre Carter was a wide receiver in that offense.
That guy randomly started being relevant for a couple weeks. As
they
a wide
need people, but is it going to be somebody who can be steady and kind of keep defenses off of Terry? Because the way it seemed is everybody was just doubling Terry or covering Terry, and it didn't matter. And I'm not going to call him Scary Terry because he doesn't like it. So we'll just go with Terry. So
like Terry McLaren.
Yeah, but no, I think that's a good buy. Like I said, I considered him for one of my sell players, and I really thought about it. I said, this is the best quarterback he's ever had. So we'll just go with it. But my next one is a very similar situation, and it's DK Metcalf. So just like Terry, they were the same draft class, going to be a free agent at the end of this year. Neither of them were first-round picks. They don't have a fifth-year option. Even if the Seahawks have nobody at quarterback, if Drew Lock is their quarterback this year, I'm still starting DK Metcalf every week. If they get a better quarterback, his stock goes up. If he is a free agent and goes somewhere else, his stock goes up. If they trade Tyler Lockett, his stock goes up. I know he's already in that end of wide receiver 1 territory, but I think DK Metcalf has nowhere to go but up. He is a ginormous, just gigantic, big body, like monster who runs insanely fast and is going to beat anybody. He's also young. He's also learning more and more every year. You look at the routes that he was running when he first came into the league versus now. He had a kind of limited route tree when he started, and that had to do with his big frame and when he speeds up, slows down, how he's getting in and out of cuts. But you look at how he finesses those routes now, like he has actually matured as a player as well. And that probably has a lot to do with how good Tyler Lockett is there and the fact that he had Russell Wilson throwing in the ball and saying, hey, when you make this cut, I need you to go here because the defender is doing this. You know, those are players that you learn from in that offense that Tyler Lockett and Russell Wilson could teach DK Metcalf probably more about football than he had learned in his whole life up until then. So I like the growth that he's shown. I think he's only going to continue to grow, and he has the opportunity to get paid and go somewhere next year. So I think they'll end up keeping him, especially if they go out and get a franchise quarterback, whether they draft Malik Willis at 9 and they want to make him the franchise quarterback, or they go get Deshaun Watson or somebody else. I heard Deshaun may not be interested in Seattle. Is that true?
I heard you hear a bunch of nonsense from every
you can't know what's sources,
but yeah. I heard that he would refuse to waive his no trade clause for the Seahawks. That the Seahawks aren't an option on the table for him.
Yeah, I saw that as well. So maybe they're out on that. We don't know if you can believe that or not. We'll have to see. I'm a little worried about him going to the Browns because of how Baker Mayfield's post was, but
if Baker goes somewhere else, is that actually better for Baker if he gets the Seahawks or the Colts?
Yes.
That's better than the Browns. So if he can get booted out and then get the landing spot,
I think Baker Mayfield as like a player and the style of quarterback that he is would fit better trying to do that Russell Wilson job than he would playing in Stefanski's offense. So I think it's an upgrade for Baker if he goes there. Not only that, he's going to an offense that's going to pass the ball more than he was. They've got DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett if they keep Tyler Lockett. Like, it's an upgrade for Baker Mayfield, in my opinion. He goes from a team with 2 great running backs that are the focal point to 2 great wide receivers and no running backs. Yeah. So I think it would be an upgrade for Baker Mayfield. But that's why I'm buying DK. What do you think about DK?
I'm scared. I'm scared about the quarterback situation. I'm scared about the future. But at the same time, the dude is young enough and he's talented enough to where I think he can overcome it. And I think that, like you said, right now he's at the bottom. You gotta hope that people are, when you're trying to buy him, aren't saying like, "Oh, but he's still great." You gotta knock him yourself when you're having those negotiations. Be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, but
He
Russell's
lost
not
his
there.
quarterback. Like,
Oh,
they
but
could be the next
he's gonna be on a new
Cleveland.
team. Who knows where he's gonna be after
Yeah.
that?" But honestly, with his talent, I think if you can get someone willing to just be like, "Oh, dang, it is over for him," and then you finesse him and take DK is anywhere but up at this point.
Yep. And that's why he's a target for me. Is just, I traded
Yeah,
for him
that's
in the
why I
middle of
didn't
last
like
year.
Lockett. Lockett didn't have the age,
Yeah.
but DK does.
Yeah. And DK is in a better spot contract wise than Lockett. He's younger, and I think he is going to be better in a bad offense than Tyler Lockett will be. So that's just, I think he's a buy, especially with how down people are about that offense. So especially if we see a quarterback go there in the next week, it could drastically change their outlook on it. So I think it's worth looking at. But who's your next guy?
So my next guy is someone who I think is legit. People are hit and miss. Some people think that he's been overrated. Some people think that he could be the next best thing. So you got to find someone when you're trying to make these trades who isn't too hot on him. But I really like Darnell Mooney. I think he is the real deal. I think what he showed last year with how well he balled out, even when Allen Robinson was on the field and playing, they just went straight to Mooney. They ignored him. I think he is the future. He's a really young guy. I think he could be a good, solid piece for your dynasty offense that you can get cheaper than the other young guys like CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase. He has the same upside with a whole lot less price because this was the first year of Fields and he put up some really good numbers. And Fields is only going to progress.
Yeah.
And Mooney is only going to get better with him. I think that what he's shown wasn't a like little blip in the pan. It wasn't like a situation where he was just taking advantage. Although to an extent there wasn't too many options. He was taking advantage of being a target hog, but you had some times where he was just putting up yards, not just getting all of the, like Jalen Waddle force fed all the targets, not that many yards. Mooney was getting the deep ball. He was making plays. He was doing yards after catch. He is the real deal. I think you will be happy with him for a long time coming.
Matt Nagy is gone.
And Matt Nagy is gone.
So
hallelujah.
So the sky is the limit for Darnell Mooney. I'll never understand why they franchise tagged Allen Robinson and then didn't throw him the ball, but that's a different conversation. But no, I'm right there with you. I think he is a steal of a player. I think he is going to be what everyone thinks Gabriel Davis is going to be, and he's a cheaper price. So I think Gabriel Davis's expectations are too high, and Darnell Mooney we're forgetting about, but I think Darnell Mooney is going to be what people want Gabriel Davis to be. And I just think that they both have unlimited potential. The only difference is Gabriel Davis is in an offense with Stephon Diggs, Dawson Knox. Like, he had a 4-touchdown playoff game, and it's incredible. But that's not going to happen every week. And Darnell Mooney is the guy. So I do think they need to bring somebody else in with it.
They can't just have him. I don't think he can survive being heavily focused by every team.
Yeah. Cole Kmet is their tight end now. We saw him,
and he's coming into it.
He took another
take a little longer.
He took another step this last year. Obviously with the passing offense that they had, which was, like you said, Justin Fields' first year, kind of took them a little bit to get into it. Andy Dalton started the season. It was just a cluster, giant clusterfuck in Chicago. So who knows? I don't think there's going to be any sort of problems with them, but I think Darnell Mooney's a great buy. They just need to add more options there. So we'll see what they do. But my next buy is kind of a similar rank in some dynasty rankings, a little bit lower, but down in the late 20s is Chase Claypool. A lot of people, we talked about Amari when he went to Cleveland, and is it a downgrade because of Baker? And now we've got Trubisky as the quarterback in Pittsburgh, and there's a lot of people who think Mitchell Trubisky sucks. And I am in the boat of, and I've been in this boat for a long time, and we talked about it a little bit, is I thought he got screwed by Matt Nagy. I thought he was better than he was given credit. He took the Bears to a playoff game, and if it wasn't for a double doink, would have gone further. I think that he has been ran out of town because the organization was managed poorly, and I think that him getting an opportunity to start, he has the opportunity to become a franchise quarterback again. Will he make it? I don't know. But that's how I view Mitchell Trubisky. I think Chase Claypool is being hit by a lot of these people not liking Mitchell Trubisky. And Chase Claypool, he plays that field stretching role for them. He's, a big frame, outside guy. They're losing Juju, but we saw them a lot without Juju last year after the shoulder injury. But Deontay on the other side is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. So there's a very real possibility that they draft a quarterback and that quarterback becomes their starter next year, or Trubisky ends up being that guy. And Chase Claypool is the number one on their team next year.
And James Washington's gone too. I know he's not that big of a
but he
factor,
was that guy when Juju was out. He was that third guy when Juju was gone. So now there's a lot of room in that wide receiver room. So it's really just him and Deontay. And obviously Deontay's going to get all the targets. He's going to be a monster. But I think that Chase Claypool is going to be very good as well. There's a lot of negative press on Chase Claypool after the whole running the ball to the line and stuff. But, hey, I'm a Cowboys fan and Dak got bodied by a ref, so I'm used to these sort of things. But, it is what it is. So I think the biggest thing is the opportunities are going to be there for Claypool. People are discrediting Mitchell Trubisky as a passer when I think he is at least average. And Big Ben was not throwing the ball well.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up. I was gonna say the people were disappointed. The Claypool owners, who are you going to be taking advantage of right now, they didn't like how well he did last year. They have a bad taste in their mouth. They want to move on. But I mean, that wasn't Ben Roethlisberger. He was past his prime. He was expired. That's Ben Rottenberger's.
Yes.
Like it's not the same. Trubisky, for the faults that he may have had before, can at least throw the ball deep that Ben couldn't do anymore. He's got a young arm, and he can make the big plays that Claypool just stopped having.
And he can extend plays that Ben Roethlisberger could not do. So we're talking about, if you take in just those third down sacks or something, like those plays that Trubisky can get out of the pocket and maybe extend a drive, get a new set of downs, that leads to more offensive opportunities. That leads to more touchdown, red zone opportunities. That leads to more shots to Chase Claypool. Like, I think all of that helps their offense. That Big Ben, as much as Big Ben was a name, like you said, this was the end of Big Ben. This was washed Big Ben. This was Big Ben tiny arm. It's Trubisky is still going to be productive in that offense, and I think that Chase Claypool has taken some hits, and maybe owners are, not too happy, and then they see Trubisky come in and they're like, "Oh crap, what do we do now?" I think you can get him, and I think he's a good person to get.
So you want to go after him in our league, try and get that stack?
I already tried. I offered
a owner to negotiate with.
Yes, it is. I offered Jalen Phillips, which was a second-round rookie pick, end of the second last year, and like a fourth or something. And Jalen Phillips looks like he's going to be a great defensive line prospect, So I don't know what he values him at, but I offered what I felt like was a good offer. So we'll see. We're talking about somebody outside of the top 24 in Dynasty rankings, with top 12 potential. So I think he has that potential. I think the touchdown opportunities will be there. I think the possession game will take a step forward with a lack of a real established third guy there, whether that's Juju or James Washington. Now, if Juju comes back, I'm probably not buying Chase Claypool. But I don't think Juju's going to come back unless the market really, really sucks.
From what I heard, though, I did see a tweet that said there is absolutely none. I think it said literally zero was the words that the tweet used. Interest in Juju. That no teams are even trying to talk to him.
So
Nobody
it is
cares.
possible. It is possible he ends up back in Pittsburgh and just plays the same role.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think who was really talked about. I know last year there was the Chiefs were one of the names.
The
Jets
Ravens
were mentioned, but the Jets are mentioned just to drive value up. They're like the Jaguars, where you throw in one of those two names, you know those teams have to overpay, and suddenly the other team's negotiating. Oh, they're in the mix. You got to overpay a little bit.
The Ravens were one of those teams, and they eventually settled for Sammy Watkins. They apparently offered him more than what he took to play in Pittsburgh. But I have no idea what's going to happen to Juju.
Chiefs, I know, are the two. I don't see why the Chiefs wouldn't be in on him now. I don't see why they wouldn't try and make that happen. But
it seems they're in on Mecole Hardman.
He didn't for some reason.
So I think the Chiefs are in on Mecole Hardman.
I don't know yet. We'll see.
I know we've played this game every year, right? Like Mecole Hardman, second round pick. Like, what are they going to do with him? If you look at his snaps and his usage last year compared to the previous years, he really became the third guy the second half of the year last year. Will it stick? Who knows? But
yeah, who knows?
But I think they're willing to give it a shot. And it seemed like he finally got to that. He was making a lot of dumb mistakes his first 2 years. Just stupid plays that would get him off the field, right? And we saw DeMarcus Robinson and Byron Pringle. Well, the second half of the year, it was really him. You know, Byron Pringle had his appearances, but Mecole Hardman was that guy. And we say third guy because the second guy is really Travis Kelce. Or maybe the first guy is Travis Kelce, depending on how you want to do it. But there's clearly two guys in front of him. So I don't know if the Chiefs would be in on Juju anymore. I think it all depends on how much he wants. And like last year was supposed to be that year where people didn't sign long-term deals because of the COVID salary cap impact. Well, nobody besides Christian Kirk is signing big deals at all.
Yeah, things aren't looking as crazy.
Maybe Mike Williams, you could count 3 years,
Even
$60
then, when
million.
You look at Christian Kirk has incentives to be paid more than Mike Williams.
Yeah. Michael Gallup got in 5 years what Mike Williams got for 3, and then you've got Christian Kirk and no wide receivers are getting paid.
We'll see when Allen Robinson, where he goes and what he gets paid, because I'm looking at the names. He looks like he should be the biggest remaining free agent for contract numbers.
There are some guys out there that we're going to see sign, but it just depends on what size of contract. Like MVS, like you said, maybe the Raiders. There's other teams that are rumored to really like MVS.
Oh, maybe the Chiefs want him.
Jamison Crowder. I would love to see Jamison Crowder go to the Packers and play that Randall Cobb role. Would love to see it.
AJ Green's a free agent again. We'll see if he's done or not.
Will Fuller is a free agent who missed a lot of last year with a broken finger that he ended up having surgery on. Juju. OBJ's got the torn ACL again, so I don't even think OBJ is going to sign in the offseason, to be honest. I think he's going to sit down, recover, wait and see what team has a big injury, go ring chasing once he's healthy. That's how I expect it to happen, but who knows? He could sign somewhere. He could go somewhere. Depends on what people offer him. But another interesting wide receiver note before we get out of here. We talked about Detroit signing a couple wide receivers. They also signed Khalif Raymond to a 2-year, almost $10 million deal. And
they're trying to get as many small-priced wide receivers, and I don't know if they understand how many receivers they can put on the field at once. So if they combine Khalif Raymond and Josh Reynolds,
they got one alpha receiver.
Better receiver who would be on the field every down, but we'll see.
I think DJ Chark was only a 1-year deal.
Yeah, that's why I didn't mention him when I was adding him up, because that's just 1 year. That's weird that they would pick up the prove it guy, but I think they just want guys on the team, I guess.
I think this tells us they're not taking a quarterback at 2. They still may take one at the end of the first, but it'll be one of those guys who needs a year. A lot of these guys need a year. Really only Malik Willis I want to see week 1, but You could
And
we could see Kenny Pickett
stack their roster too much to go for a maybe not as good year for a better quarterback in the next draft.
Yeah, like we've said before, there's a very good possibility Jared Goff starts all year for them again. It's not like they can get rid of his contract. Like, he's there, so they might as well just use him, right? So,
yeah, because I don't believe that teams intentionally tank trying to get those top picks, but I do believe that GMs intentionally set teams up to fail,
I agree.
knowing they don't need to do too well, knowing they have very, very little chance to do well.
And you look at what the Bears
could happen.
Look at the Bears right now. So the Bears just got rid of, like, they traded away Khalil Mack. You've got a new GM, new head coach. They're taking all these old regime, big money guys, getting rid of them, cutting them, and moving on so that they can build it how they want. And there's going to be GMs out there, like you said. I don't think, we'll see what happens to Stephen Ross, but I don't think there's teams out there that are, like you said, intentionally tanking. We don't got guys point shaving. We don't have guys stopping at the 1 yard line from scoring a touchdown because of anything but maybe time and wanting to run out the clock, right? So the big thing that we're looking at is, are they providing
a fat chunk of cap?
Are they providing studs for their team, or are they maybe leaving some cap space so that next year they can invest more and try to compete then, which is a very real stage for NFL teams. There's rebuilding teams where you're trying to amass picks and salary cap money so that you can take it all and invest throughout the same time, so you can open up that window to compete and go for a Super Bowl. That whether that's a 5-year window with a quarterback, a 10-year window with a franchise guy, or a 1-year window by bringing Tom Brady out of retirement. Like that, the teams are looking to build around those windows where they think they can compete. Obviously, you can have a team that doesn't have a bunch of money invested go on and compete, but we got super teams forming now, so it's going to be interesting to see some of these cycles and how it goes from there. But let's get out of here. We went a little bit longer today because there was so much free agent news to cover in the start.
Hit all the free agents, the signings, and all the
there was
nonsense.
So much more we could have talked about. But we'll touch base on some more defensive guys at the end of the week. We're going to do kind of just a overall free agency wrap up and talk about. It's not going to be a full IDP show. As you saw, we went like 40 minutes on free agent stuff today, so I'm assuming more will come down the pipe. But we'll talk about a lot of those free agent IDP signings and what it does. And then we're going to talk about a couple trade targets in IDP and what you want to look at. We won't go as much in depth because there's still a lot to be figured out with some of these depth charts. Defense, we can't really be as clear as we can with, all right, this guy is going to be the wide receiver 1 on this team. There's a lot more that goes into defense and what the defensive scheme is and where coaches are playing guys and stuff. We got to kind of let it settle a little bit before we see for sure. But there are some guys out there that we'll touch base on. And the Breece Hall rookie prospect video is going to be up on Patreon on Friday. I am editing it right now, and it'll go up as soon as it's done, but I'm expecting Friday. So check it out if you want to see it. Make sure you become a Patreon supporter. Only $3 to see that, but we'll be going through some more. I want to have 2 at least out next week, so we're going to go through at least that. We're going to start top 5. I want to get the top 10, but I want to make sure I get wide receivers and running backs out there so we can start kind of getting ready for draft season and rookie drafts. And the draft will be here before we know it, so we got to get ready. Anything you want to say before we get out of here?
No, I think that wraps it up.
All right, off the top of your head right now, who's winning the Super Bowl?
The Jets, of course.
Like, I knew you were going to say that. All right. Well, we'll get out of here. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get it. If you're on Spotify, Apple Music, leave a review so we can beat that algorithm and kind of get some search and some recommendations going. But otherwise, have a good one. If you guys have any questions, make sure to comment on the YouTube video. If you want to see it in video, go to YouTube and you can check us out there. Otherwise, have a good one. We're out of here.